So, Chris, I was curious if you would not mind sharing some of your childhood experiences. Where are you from? What is your, how was your youth like? How was your childhood like?
I was born in the UK, and I no longer live there. I haven't lived in the UK for about 20 years now. So I grew up in a small, and my family actually grew up in the north of England. So they grew up in Lancashire, and they moved down, and I was the first one in the family to be born in the south of England, which is quite different. There's a very different kind of cultural history between the north and the south. And I feel quite blessed to have the mix of my family coming from the north, but having grown up in the south. So I got into sales and primarily technology sales because I saw that was a quick way to make money. And that really drove me then to get more into technology. I then, after about 5 years of working in that space, I decided to take a break and moved over to South America, where I worked in not-for-profits in between Peru, Bolivia, Argentina. I ended up working in technology again for one of the world's biggest consultancies, which is Capgemini, who I know probably have about 200,000 employees over in India. So I worked for them primarily in the areas of business analytics and data analytics and big data, as it's now called. It used to be analytics and business intelligence.
Most of the people do not venture out from where you are. So you were into tech consulting, right? Tech and tech consulting, which is perhaps the go-to destination for any normal guy. So what actually prompted you to venture out from that domain and come into the domain that you are today?
Yeah, and I think it's definitely something that is a very attractive career. And I still love technology, and I definitely enjoyed a lot of it. But I think what I found was when people were asking me what I did for a living, I was talking about the charity work. I wasn't talking about what I did within the world of technology. You know, a lot of that was really just to pay the bills. So I was all about how can I make change? And, you know, that's kind of evolved into my day job now. And I love being able to see change, but from a very social point of view. Whereas when I was in tech, it was more about, okay, how can I make this company more money? And those kind of things. So it was very much as I learned to develop my time in India, it was a heart-led approach. You know, I was really following my heart as opposed to my head. And now I find myself in this lovely crossroads where I'm serving a social purpose, but I'm also working in the world of technology.
When did you decide actually to get full-time into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I definitely think there was one key moment, but just leading up to that, my father had been an entrepreneur. He'd run a number of businesses growing up, and I think I'd seen the good and the bad side of that. And you'll know this from being an entrepreneur yourself. You know, it's incredibly long hours and quite often not for much return. I saw my father and my parents go through some really hard times financially. You know, we had times when we were, didn't go on holiday for years and we were eating beans on toast and really quite restrictive lifestyles based on him just seeing this dream. I think the thing that really got me was it wasn't just setting up a business. It wasn't opening a yoga studio, which lots of people have done, or doing some repeat business for someone else. This was a completely new pioneering concept. Right. And that's the bit I loved. I loved kind of really breaking against the mold. So that gave me the appetite for what I've done with UnPlug. So I have to, take my hat off to my friend Ed Hurrell, because he was the one who said, look, you can do this. And we did it together. And it was a lot of fun,
Great. Tell us something about UnPlug. How did it come about? What is the venture all about?
Sure. Well, as I've already kind of alluded to, when I was in technology, I loved technology, and I still do. And back then and still now, I've always been a very early adopter. So I was one of the first people in the office to get an iPhone, one of the first people to get a tablet. And I kind of just consumed all of it initially. I was like, wow, all of a sudden we can work out of office hours. This is amazing. And I never stood back and thought of the consequences. Initially, I thought that was a really good thing. And then in the long run, it started to have a really negative impact on my own productivity and my well-being. Look, there's definitely some correlation here. There isn't any causation, but there's definitely impacts into mental health, impacts into productivity in all these different areas. So I just started to put together a team and some ideas. And initially it was around events as to help people take some time away from technology. And what we soon realized was two things. One of the biggest influences for the majority of us would be the workplace and the culture of how we use digital technology there. And then secondly, for me, my background being the corporate, it was the easiest, and for the rest of the team, the easiest way for us to actually grow our base in the corporate space. And for the first couple of years, I think a lot of the time we spent was almost just advocacy. We had to explain what the concept of digital well-being was, digital culture was. It's gone through a number of iterations. I think a long time ago, there was this term digital detox, which we never really liked because it suggests technology is bad and that you can just get rid of it over a weekend. Whereas for us, we've always said, look, technology is neutral. It has fantastic power and, lots of things we can use and get a lot from. But at the same time, we need to be in control and actually manage that as opposed to it managing us. The likes of lockdown has really brought it to the front. Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, said back in April, we've had 2 years of digital transformation in 2 months. And whilst that's really exciting and kudos to all the IT departments around the world, there is also an impact on our behavior as humans, and we have to just take that on board. How is this impacting our focus? How is this impacting our ability to switch off and recharge and be effective?
Absolutely on point when it comes to the importance and the relevance of digital well-being. It has never been more relevant and more required as far as our lives are concerned, both personal and professional. So, Chris, tell me, if you could, give one phrase or one line, which is the driving force or the driving thought behind UnPlug, what would that be?
It's probably personal experience, because everyone on the team, and me definitely included, I've felt and I still feel how technology can influence us, and being aware as to how I need to change that in order to be effective as a human.
What you are doing, what you are doing at UnPlug is kind of a balance between a social enterprise and a commercial enterprise. So how do you balance that? How do you balance the financial consideration with the social cause that you are espousing? How do you do that?
Yeah, it was a question that we were still kind of, it's a little bit fluid for us, if I'm to be honest. I think if we were in a situation where we had, a year to 2 years worth of corporate bookings, then it would be easy for us to forecast. The market is so new. It's so fluid that it's really hard for us to do that. We've been in situations where in March we had 6 months worth of work, and all of a sudden at the end of March we had 0 work, and we've had to pivot to do web delivery, and now we're in pretty good shape. So for us, we've definitely always been a commercial organization, but the social slant, we do a lot of work with charities, primarily for free. So we would go in and actually do web deliveries now for charities. And a lot of the work we did in the schools was either sponsored or we did it pro bono. So there was a kind of a little bit of a parallel there, but it was more in a way like a social responsibility arm.
Right. So what I hear you saying is that you would do the commercial part of the venture. However, that part of it funds the organization and the pro bono initiatives. Does that sound like what you do?
That's right. Right. Yeah.
Fair. Because I think a lot of social entrepreneurs right now are struggling between juggling the commercial part of it and the social part of it. So I think this is a great learning and very important for them to be incorporated in the foundation itself. I always see technology by drawing a parallel with cholesterol. So there's always good cholesterol and bad cholesterol, right? So how do you kind of draw that thin line between good technology and bad technology?
I love that analogy. There's the challenge with that. It's different for every single one of us.
Absolutely.
There are actually needs for their job or for their research, need to spend time on YouTube or on Facebook or on LinkedIn. I think the key for me is it's finding what you think. There are very obvious contenders, the likes of the entertainment and the social media typically would be, your high fats and sugary food, whereas more educational resources might be more healthier, your greens, let's say. Finding out our own patterns and what works for us and what doesn't is the most important thing, the first thing to help us change.
Right, and I think perhaps the biggest opportunity and the biggest threat both lie in the fact that technology has become too personal for an individual. So there is no standard prescription that we can issue. What is your go-to piece of literature that helps you introspect?
Probably a poetry book by Dana Folds. It's
Right.
something that I find really, really grounding. She's one of my favorite poets.
Okay, so name your favorite all-time movie.
Oh, this is the hardest question ever, Jayesh, because it really depends on the mood. Do you know what? I'm going to restrict it to Bollywood films, right? And there is by far my all-time favorite movie. Although Eka the Tiger was filmed in Dublin, and I met the late Girish Ganesh because he was part of Kalkeli Sangeet Pichala. My number one Indian film, The Three Idiots, by a long shot. I love it. It's such a beautiful film because I think it challenges, you know, we all have challenges within every society. And for me, it was the first Indian film I saw challenges some of the biggest issues that are in India, but in such an epically beautiful way with humor. And then, you know, the whole Bollywood's bubble, which just makes it magical. So that's a great Bollywood film for me.
Favorite band or favorite musician?
Favorite band or musician. One of the people who really influenced me, even just to start looking at going to India, this would have been like 20 years ago.
Right.
I got a demo tape from an album called Broken Skin by a guy called Nitin Sawhney, whose parents came over from India in the 1960s or 70s to the UK. And he took Hindustani classical music and he added in all these different Western influences. And it's one of the beautiful artists I've ever come across in my life. I've seen him live so many times.
Favorite holiday destination?
I think you should know this already. Right? I think, look, if I'm looking for a short weekend away, I would say something simple in Europe and probably somewhere in Ireland. Right. But if I have a holiday, if I could just choose one holiday every year, it'd be somewhere either Rishikesh or Anjuna, somewhere like that. So yeah, I mean, I used to go to Rishikesh back every year for a month after I lived there, just for the International Yoga Festival and to see Prem Baba and Muji and all those guys.
If there is one piece of advice that you have for 20-year-old Chris, what would that be?
Slow down. I still am very guilty of this. I try to fit too much in. And I think the only time I've really slowed down, like when my father was with a brain tumor, I spent more time with him. And I'm so grateful for that. But even when I was in India, and I was in some of the most beautiful places I've ever been to in the world, and it was all about, I'll take the photos to get the likes on social media, because that was the mindset that I had at the time.
So in your mind, what are the two most important skills that entrepreneurs, especially ones who are pursuing the social cause, need to have or need to inculcate in themselves?
Yeah, from my own experience, I think probably the one thing that I've only really learned in more recent times is self-compassion. When you're very passionate about a subject, so especially for social entrepreneurs and for pioneers, almost nothing else matters. You know, everything else takes second place.
Right.
And I found myself a couple of years ago in a situation where financially I was paying the team, but I'd cut back on my own expenditure. Because the only thing that really mattered was the success of the company, which never works in the long run. You know, in the short run, for maybe a couple of months, that's a really good way to, you know, build a product overnight. But for UnPlug, it's been a very, very slow build, and it still is because it's such a new space. Sure. So I'm definitely now a lot more self-compassionate. I give myself a lot more time. And I think especially in today's world, if you can stay going as a business for a couple of years and then down the road have a positive impact, amazing. But you can only do that if you look after yourself first of all. And I had some...